Welcome, everyone, to the May 23rd, 2025 He's Running episode of On Iowa Politics. This week on the podcast, we have a slate of candidate announcements to talk about for both state and federal offices. 2026 is here, folks, whether we like it or not. Narrator, we do not. Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Murphy, the Des Moines bureau chief for the Gazette in Cedar Rapids. And that is literally, I am in Cedar Rapids today, as you can see behind me. I'm usually at my office in Des Moines. Had a shindig to come to the office for today, which I'll get to later. So it's good to be coming in from the mothership this week. With me as well, our lead Des Moines bureau chief, Marchel. Hello, Maya.
Good afternoon, Erin.
Sarah Watson, fresh off of duty, is able to join us this week. How you doing, Sarah?
I'm good. My back hurts from sitting in the courtroom, but it's
that'll do it.
Yeah, but like honestly, it's fine. It's actually not a big deal. But yeah. Yes, I've been in court all week this week.
Yeah, not the most padded seats in the world in those courtrooms, right? And Gazette columnist Todd Dorman is here. How's your seat, Todd?
It's red and aluminum, and in no way is ergonomically sound. I'm probably just gonna collapse. It's funny. No one cares, but I asked Human Resources a question recently, and I was informed that somehow I had won a ball chair.
Wow!
And I'm like, I had no idea. My boss previously, Jeff Tecklenburg, he sat on the ball chair, and every once in a while I would just see his feet up in the air because he fell off. I don't know if I won a ball chair, although I'd be here by myself probably, so no one would know.
Yeah, I don't know if you won that, Todd.
Yeah, I think I may donate it to someone who wants it.
Oh, man. All right. So as I said at the top, we got a slew of candidate announcements to talk about this week. And let's start at the congressional level, where this week, Republican Western Iowa lawmaker Lynn Evans said he is exploring a run for the U.S. House in Iowa's uber-conservative 4th District. That seat may be open because current 4th District Congressman Randy Feenstra is also exploring a run for governor. Maya, you wrote the story for us this week, talked to Senator Evans, so let's bring you in on this one. Give us a kind of a quick bio for folks who may not know Senator Evans and tell us what he had to say in his announcement.
Yeah, so Senator Lynn Evans is a Republican senator. He represents District 3 in the Iowa Senate, and that covers counties in Western Iowa, including Buena Vista and Osceola counties. He is in his first term in the Iowa legislature. He was originally elected in 2022, and he's currently the chair of the Senate Education Committee, and he's also the assistant majority leader in the Iowa Senate. Before serving in office, he had a long career in education. He was a superintendent of many different school districts, including the Alta Aurelia Community School District, and he's currently an adjunct instructor at Buena Vista Community College. In his announcement this week, he said he's launching an exploratory committee, which is something we're seeing a lot of in the last few months with a lot of different candidates.
A lot of exploring going on right now.
Yeah. A lot of exploring, and he's going to be doing this exploring over the next month to 30 days, just traveling around the district, talking to folks, getting their thoughts on it, including an event I think he's going to be hosting in Council Bluffs in the next few days or next week, and just kind of getting people's thoughts on it. He said that he wants to continue the conservative leadership in the district and kind of carry the torch that Feenstra was holding. He touted his past endorsement of Trump in last election and really kind of pushing that's, where his values lie, continuing the conservative values of that district. So, yeah, that's where he's at right now.
Did he talk about anything in the way of policy, like any issues that he wants to tackle or anything along those lines?
No, he stayed pretty high level. He just said that, this district needs someone who understands rural Iowa and is ready to fight for those values on day one. That's where he's at.
Yep. when you're still exploring, maybe you don't have to get into those things yet until you're actually running. We would have asked Jared, our Western Iowa whisperer, about this if he had been able to make it. He had other duties as assigned as we sit here and record Thursday afternoon. So Todd, I'll put you on the spot. Maybe not Senator Evans specifically, but if Congressman Feenstra does wind up running for governor and creating an open seat race here, what will it take to win that Republican primary in that district?
Well, it's just a guess. I think you'd have to be pretty conservative to win that district.
You can't just get this kind of analysis anywhere, folks. This is why you come to the On Iowa Politics podcast.
This is it. I mean, it's for one thing, it's in the west side of the state, which is more conservative, unlike voter-rich Eastern Iowa. Yeah, get all the cliches out. I don't know. I mean if it's all going to be about which they'll probably, if Feenstra runs for governor, which I suspect he will since he's running ads, but maybe not. But I think he's going to. There's going to be a lot of people in that primary. And what we don't know right now, if there's going to be anybody that's a little higher profile than Senator Evans that may jump into that. I haven't heard any rumors of anyone, but you'd think that there would be someone in that district that might try to get a fairly easy road to Congress after they win the primary. In fact, the primary is the race.
Right.
So generally, unless we're looking at a blue tsunami, but blue tsunami doesn't even get to Northwest Iowa. It kind of washes out somewhere south of I-80 usually. So yeah. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. All the congressional races are sort of interesting, but we're seeing candidates come out, could be decent Congress people. I don't know why they would want to be a congressperson. One of the 435 people, like you win on election night after you give your acceptance speech, you start raising money for the next campaign. It seems like it's a lot of fun out there. Everyone's simpatico. We're going to see more candidates.
Yeah.
We're going to see more Democrats in the first, probably. I don't know about the second. Kevin Techow may be the only one interested because nobody else thinks they can win. And already Zach Nunn is drawing quite a bit of. I mean, he's drawing some decent candidates.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how much that field grows still. We've talked about Sarah Trone Garrett and Jennifer Conforst already in that one. I don't know whom else I haven't heard necessarily, but I wouldn't assume that those will be the only two at this point. It wouldn't surprise me at all if another Democrat or two. Those are two really good candidates off the bat, but it wouldn't, just because of how competitive that district is, I wouldn't assume that we're done growing in that field. Would you, Tom? Or Todd, sorry.
That's okay. I'll be Tom. Playing the role of Todd. Tom is... I don't know. I mean, that's if it's only Jennifer Conforst and Sarah Trone Garrett, that's going to be a sort of an uncomfortable primary for Democrats to watch because, those are two fairly popular office holders in the party, and I think they're, well regarded throughout. And so, deciding who's going to win that is going to be difficult. But maybe there's someone in Des Moines, because Iowans love to elect Democrats from Des Moines. Just they love it. So anyway, but yeah, I'm with you. I'd expect that there might be another candidate or two.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. We'll see. Let's bring it back to the state level now. This past week, early in the week, I believe it was Monday, Democrat Ryan Peterman of Davenport announced he is running for Iowa Secretary of State, the state's top elections officer, not like the U.S. Secretary of State. The Iowa Secretary of State doesn't guard Iowa's borders and deal with foreign policy. Peterman is a U.S. Navy veteran and former Capitol Hill staffer, and much to my chagrin, not related to the New York Magazine magnate Jay Peterman. Sarah, you wrote about Peterman's campaign announcement. He's a local boy there. Tell us a little bit more about him.
Yeah, so he's 34 years old. He grew up in Bettendorf. His family owns a local bar in Davenport called Grumpy's Saloon. After he graduated, he from high school, he enlisted in the Naval Academy, enlisted in the Navy, graduated from the Naval Academy, served as a pilot for about 10 years, as well as an honor education officer at the Naval Academy. So when he was a lieutenant in the Navy, he was deployed to the Indo-Pacific and then the Middle East for about 7 months. And while there, he led about 25-30 sailors and a 3 to 4 person flying crew. And then he also spent a year as a legislative fellow for U.S. Senator Jean Shaheen. Apologies if I mispronounced that. Who's a Democrat from New Hampshire, and he was working on defense, national security, and veterans policy. And so we moved back to Iowa after finishing service in the Navy and started getting involved in local politics, including volunteering for State Senator Mike Zimmer's campaign here in January. And so Peterman thought he said he had some people reach out to him, see if he wanted to run, and he decided he would run for Secretary of State because he really cares about democracy, having served in the military. And he said he thinks Iowa's put in place a lot of unnecessary restrictions on voting, such as reducing the number of early voting days and closing polling locations earlier. He thinks the state should really be doing the opposite and should be making it easier for people to vote.
Yeah, he talked a little bit about that in an event in Des Moines this week as well that I popped in on. I didn't write anything about it because Sarah had done such a great job in introducing us to the candidate and her story earlier this week. If you hadn't seen that yet, check it out on any of our websites. And it was interesting. Todd, let me ask you again. There was some optimism in the room there, which there always is at this point, right? But Democrats feel like that's a state office that they can maybe get back this cycle. Do you think is Republican Iowa Secretary of State Paul Pate, who, by the way, I don't believe has officially said that he's running for re-election, so we don't know for sure. But if he does, Todd, do you think he is vulnerable? He did face a pretty serious challenge from Democrat Brad Anderson in 2008. By the way, Brad Anderson was at that event this week in Des Moines, maybe trying to provide some good vibes. But then Pate won a little more comfortably in 2022 against former Lynn County Auditor Joel Miller. What is this? What's the early handicap on this race to you, Todd?
Well, for one thing, it sounds like Peterman is vastly overqualified to be Secretary of State. You wonder if he doesn't know that it's not about foreign policy because it sounds like he's got
he might be
a fairly good background in that. Someone ought to tell him that it's you're kind of doing business documents and don't screw up the elections. And I was racking my brain. I can't remember the last time an incumbent Secretary of State was defeated. I mean, Pate was in that office for a while, and then you had Matt Schultz didn't run for re-election. He went to be a county attorney, I think,
right,
Madison County. I mean, Chet Culver ran for governor out of that office, and so it seems like it's kind of like one of those offices where if you don't mess up bad, voters will just keep you in place because chances are they may not know much about the person running against you, and they may not know who Paul Pate is, but they know he's done the job. So I wouldn't think he's in trouble, but again, if the blue tsunami comes, which I don't think it will, but he's made some mistakes, over the years, and so he's sort of vulnerable on a few things, but with all of the Senate race and congressional races and a race for governor, I just think hardly anyone is really going to be thinking about who's
that's a really good
Secretary of State. So
yeah,
they can enjoy a nice quiet campaign where they do stops explaining at every stop what the Secretary of State does, so people know.
And I'll be interested to see how it plays because I understand why he brings up the voting laws, and I don't say this to tell people how they should feel on the topic, and there's certainly very reasonable arguments to be made and to express concern with those laws. But, Iowan voters have, to the degree that anybody is voting on those issues when they vote for Secretary of State versus just checking an RRD, Iowans have spoken on those voting laws multiple times now, and it hasn't changed the fact. And we've seen polling that shows a majority of Iowans are comfortable with voter ID laws in the state. And so it'll be interesting to see if that's a message that resonates with a wide swath of voters here too.
Well, and part of the problem is if you sort of run as a reform Secretary of State, I want to help people vote. I want more people to vote. I mean, you really don't get to make any policy. It's the legislature that
that's a good point too.
Makes the policy. So I mean, I noticed Peterman was basically saying a lot of that stuff, how he didn't like the voter laws and some of that. But yeah,
that's a good point. That comes
Secretary
to
of State
desk.
just has to live with whatever they pass. So
I mean, you can propose legislation, obviously, from the Secretary of State's office, and that is not uncommon. But it's not in your hands whether that becomes law or not. That's a really good point.
And it's good if you, well, I think they changed the procedure now, but it was good if you, if you got a constitutional amendment and didn't forget to, so it didn't get on the ballot.
Hashtag grimace emoji.
Yeah, that was the gun.
I was going to say it was the gun one. Yeah. For those who don't remember this, there was a let's call it a technical snafu in the Secretary of State's office for a failure to properly notify of the passage of a proposed constitutional amendment, and it essentially required. Did they have to start all the way over from square one, or just the second?
Yeah, I think they did.
Yeah, and that's already a multi-years process because you have to pass 2 sessions of the legislature separated by an election. Yeah, that was a not small oopsie there.
Yeah, don't tick off the firearms, people. That's what I say.
That was the only thing I remember thinking at the time. Thank goodness that and I just mean this from a neutral observer having to report on the fire situation. Thank goodness it wasn't a Democratic Secretary of State who had done that accidentally, because holy moly, the Capitol building would have been burnt to the ground.
They just would have taken away all their duties, and the governor would have signed the bill, and they just, all they could do is clock in. That's about it.
Oh, goodness. All right. One other candidate to talk about who is running, but not for the office that he was exploring, is Ag Secretary Mike Naig. He had said that he's considering a run for governor, talking to people about it, had received some encouragement, and this week announced that he will not seek the governor's office and is going to instead run for re-election as Ag Secretary. He was appointed in spring of 2018, won the primary then that year and the general election that fall, was reelected in 2022. Maya, it doesn't seem like a huge shock to me. What was your reaction to Mike Naig announcing that he's going to stay in the Ag Secretary lane and run for reelection there and not run for governor?
First of all, honestly, his name, when Governor Reynolds announced she's not seeking reelection, his name was one of maybe 8 that were initially floated. And of course, many were added. There's still a lot of speculation about who will run. But I kind of forgot that he said he was going to consider. And that feels like so long ago, but it was 2 months, less than 2 months. But yeah, like he told you on Iowa Press a little less than 2 months ago, he was considering it. He was talking to folks. He needed to take some time to get his ducks in a row and see if this was really a possibility, just because, the announcement was a pretty big surprise. But, he recently announced this week that he's going to seek re-election for Ag Secretary instead, and said that, there's still a lot more to be done in growing Iowa's ag economy. So that's where he wants to be at this point.
Yeah. Not a huge shock. but noteworthy nonetheless. One more thing before we go, Sarah, speaking of the courtroom you've been sitting in all week, and we've talked about this in past podcasts as well. The city of Davenport is going through some exercises related to public information laws and the disclosure of reports around the downtown building collapse. What's been going on this week, and what's the latest? Literally fresh out of the courtroom here earlier today.
Yeah, so there's been a bench trial, which for the past 3 days. This is not about the building collapse. This is about
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. It's all good. Yeah, there's a lot to keep track of. This trial was regarding settlements paid to Davenport's former city administrator and 2 other administrative employees. So as a refresher, Davenport late 2023 announced that its city administrator would be departing and there would be a transition of leadership. And this was right after the municipal elections. And then right before Thanksgiving, they announced that she would be paid $1.6 million to settle claims of harassment and by current and former elected officials. And so the city council at that time hadn't voted on any sort of settlement with their city administrator. And so that kind of set off Davenport was already facing a lot of criticism around the building collapse, and that just set off even more backlash, especially with just the timing of how it was done. And so they did eventually vote on the settlement agreements in at the very last meeting of the year that year, December 13th, I believe, 2023, they voted to ratify the agreements. And so there's a local attorney, his name's Mike Malloy, and his client, Alan Dirks, who's a Davenport chiropractor, they're very avid record, I don't know if enthusiasts is the right word, but they frequently
Record seekers.
Yeah, they have gone to court in other cases in areas where they believe that city governments or county governments are not being as transparent or following the open meetings or open records laws. And so in this case, they filed suit and they are arguing that these agreements are void, that they essentially weren't properly approved before they were executed by the city attorney, that they should have been approved in open session before they were ratified, and that the city council violated open meetings law on that final meeting. And so the scope is fairly narrow of this trial. There were some other kind of issues relating to open meetings that kind of came up during the trial, but the judge is pretty much just focused on, did the city violate open meetings law during the December closed session meeting, and were these agreements appropriately approved? So the city Mike Malloy has called most of the city council members, the former city attorney, the former city administrator, the mayor, all to the stand. And so they've all given their recollection of how the agreements were approved. Like I said, the scope's pretty narrow, so they're not talking about whether it was right or appropriate for them to pay these settlements. It's more, were these approved in the right way? So that's what I've been covering. So they just rested today.
Okay.
And then they have, because it's a bench trial, the judge is asking for written closing arguments. And so they've set a deadline for 2 weeks. So June 6th, for each of the parties to get those closing arguments in. And then the judge is expected to make a ruling at some point after that. This is actually my first trial that I've covered. So
Ooh.
I don't really, and this is an unusual trial. It's
right.
It's not a typical, criminal case or
Right.
A typical case. So I've no idea how it's going to go or what the judge is going to rule, but it was interesting.
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see how they ultimately rule, obviously, especially for us. We're always interested in how open records rulings go. And forgive me and thank you for correcting me. Like you said, it's hard to tell a Davenport open records issue without a scorecard. these days.
Yeah, I think those two issues kind of get conflated when they talk
Sure.
about, like, for example, when the open meetings bill was proposed, I think people get a little bit conflated between like the building collapse and and these like settlements, because
Right.
the settlements was the issue where there has been this lawsuit brought related to like open meetings and public records, and there was this outrage that, oh, these agreements aren't being voted on in public, and
Mhm.
yeah, whereas with the building collapse, actually the city, at least at first, I mean, they like dumped a whole bunch of documents, but then, they were, yeah. So anyway, there's been some issues since then, but yeah.
Right. All right. Well, we'll find out and cover that when that ruling comes down. That should do it for this week's episode of On Iowa Politics. We thank you all for tuning in. If you're not already, please subscribe to us on your streaming service of choice or on YouTube, where you can also smash that like button. You can also find the podcast each and every week on your preferred Gazette or Lean newspaper website. Now that you listen to the On Iowa Politics podcast, make sure you're also subscribed to the On Iowa Politics newsletter, where every morning in your inbox, you will find all the latest politics and government coverage from our team. You can subscribe to that free newsletter at the Gazette's website, thegazette.com. And lastly, don't forget that the work of everyone you heard here today can be found on the pages and websites of the Quad City Times, Muscatine Journal, Cedar Rapids Gazette, Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier, Mason City Globe Gazette, Council Bluffs Daily Nonpareil, and the Sioux City Journal. Before I completely log off, just one real quick note, point of personal privilege, as they say in the Senate. I mentioned that I'm here in Cedar Rapids recording today, and the reason is I came to join a little celebration of an editor who's retiring here from the Gazette, Craig Jamolis. And Craig has had a long, nearly 50-year career in newspapers and journalism. The last 10-ish or so years, I believe, at the Gazette. And I just want to take this time to thank Craig publicly for his work, his service in general to journalism, and his work with me. I'm really fortunate to get, and I think it's mostly the TV thing, from doing Iowa Press, people will recognize me and come up and thank me for the work that I do. So if you are ever any among those people who feel that Erin Murphy has done anything good at all in his reporting, I need you to know that there's a really, really good chance that at least part of that is because of Craig Jamolis' work as well. I've been really fortunate to work under and with some fantastic journalists since I came to the Gazette, starting with Rod Boshart and James Lynch, and Craig has been just as important a figure in my career here as well. He's just a terrific journalist and a terrific editor, and I'm going to miss working with him, and I'm going to tell him that personally on my way out the door here today too, but I wanted folks to hear it publicly as well. So congratulations to Craig, and all the best. For the rest of the gang here, Maya Marchel Hoff, Sarah Watson, Todd Dorman, and our producer Bailey.cichon, I'm Erin Murphy. Be well, everyone, and be good.